Thank you so much for choosing CAS TV. This is The Conversation with me, Temtai Kirui, and today I'm taking you outside the studio to this place. It's called Tamambo Karen Blixen, found in Karen area here in Nairobi, where in a short while I'll be having a discussion with Nancy Githaiga, who is the head of conservation program at the WWF Kenya, together with Ebenezer Amadi. He is the program manager for sustainable inclusive business, to have a discussion on the private sector dialogue that they had some few days ago in regards to how we can bring business people together with conservation to talk about the economical sustainability way going forward. So this discussion is going to happen in a short while. Don't go so far. I can only underestimate my need to bring today's dialogue with the relevant environment stakeholders on your screen today. This is because we as a nation can get the seriousness to tackle climate change through preserving our environment. However, it has been shown that our culture towards conservation is directly or indirectly influenced by the governments, non-governmental organizations, and private sector's steps to not only enact but also follow up on the policies, decisions, and actions which will determine the state of environment in our country. In our conversation today, I'm sitting down with the head of conservation program at WWF Kenya, Nancy Githaiga, the program manager of sustainable inclusive business from KEPSA, Ebenezer Amadi, and joining us through a digital platform is the chairman of BIDCO Africa, Mr. Vimal Shah.
We need to talk about our planet and our business and figure out how we can be able to bring those two together and make sure we are focused on people, planet, and profit at the same time. This event is brought to you by the WWF World Wildlife Foundation.
It's really interesting to have this discussion with you. I was really interested with what was happening not so long ago on that conversation. I was unfortunately not able to go there, but I knew if I can get time to sit down and just understand what brought together that partnership, then we can continue that conversation and maybe push forward the message that we bring there. So probably first of all, we have SIB and WWF. I'm interested to know what brought the partnership in it.
Yeah, thanks, Temtai. Maybe I can say something and Ebenezer could add. As WWF, we are a conservation organization working on conservation issues, not preservation, but conservation issues. Because we look at nature as our home. We look at nature as what provides us capital for the work that we do. And for a long time, I think we've been speaking to ourselves, converted people, conservation organizations. But the key driver for even what is happening and the key solution would come from the private sector. So we did engage with KEPSA and through KEPSA SIB, which is their knowledge arm. I think Ebenezer can talk about that. And we're asking ourselves, what can businesses do, on issues of biodiversity loss? How can they come in as part of the solution? Because they are the ones actually who would have the solution as the people who control the economy. So that is how that discussion came in. So as opposed to speaking to ourselves who are already converted that we need to bend the curve on biodiversity loss, who are these major actors that would be a problem but also provide the solution? And that's how these partnership discussions began.
Yeah, just also add on to what Nancy mentioned, a quick introduction to who KEPSA is and as sustainable inclusive business. So Kenya Private Sector Alliance is an umbrella body of the private sector in Kenya, and we have different memberships. So we have business membership organizations, and we also have corporates. So, and the Sustainable Inclusive Business is a knowledge center within the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. So we, one of the things that we do is to ensure that the business, businesses are able to adopt sustainable business practices. So do this by having dialogues, having conversations, like for example, what we did with WWF, and also through research, sometimes also through our public-private dialogue platforms, We also envision to influence policy through evidence-based advocacy, so where you conduct research and use the findings to influence policy. So speaking specifically onto this partnership, as she mentioned, is that WWF had a partnership where they were filming or screening the one of the film that is being shown on Netflix called Our Planet, Our Business. I think most of your viewers probably have watched part of it, and for those who have not watched, then you need to go and watch it. To some extent, then it was an avenue for business leaders to be able to have a conversation. So it was a conversation starter on what businesses are doing in terms of conservation of the environment. Because we know that businesses exist within an environment, and in the environment then you find a community. Then the question that you'll ask then is that who is responsible for the environment? It's each and every one of us. So it includes the community and the corporates. And so in this context then is the private sector. So we had a discussion. Of course, we have been having partnerships even beyond this with WWF. And we said that this could be a conversation starter just to bring business leaders together, have a conversation around what are the initiatives that they are implementing in terms of looking at the environment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vimal, for making time for us here at Cast Media.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to hear your reaction following the dialogue that you had some few weeks ago, where you had a private sector dialoguing with the conservationists, yeah? And what was your take on it? What, do you think it's time for conservationists and private sectors to continue this dialogue?
I think it's absolutely required. I think what is required is that every company should be able to make sure that they are sustainable. And the definition of sustainability is people, planet, and profits. So when you look at all three, you must combine the whole three together and make sure you're working on all three fronts. If you're not profitable, you won't be able to sustain yourself, number one. Number two, if you're not looking after the planet, then soon you will run out of resources, and you won't have anything that's renewable or replenishment will be difficult. And of course, the people. I think the people is important to make sure that we have happy, healthy living, and then our people who work with us. First of all, our family or employees, we call them family, all our members, and also our consumers and the supply chain. If our supply chains are not robust, and that COVID showed us a lot, that if you're not really going to be robust and you don't worry about their sustainability, you could soon be depleting a lot of resources. Apart from that, customers, giving them wholesome products and making sure that they too are sustainable. And that's what we had to do this year, to make sure that we don't increase our prices, we keep our prices low, and make sure that everybody gets the product and it's affordable. So it was a time when you're not looking at profits, you're looking at, okay, how do I sustain myself? So sustainability is a given, and I think every single company across the world needs to make sure that whichever way you got to look at it, you've got to be sustainable. I think it's a given. It's not an option anymore.
Yeah. And it's very interesting, Vimal, even as I was following up on the discussion you were having at that time, it seemed that every business leader who was there, that panel was agreeing that, yes, this is something that all of us as stakeholders of environment need to be working on this. But for a while there, the conversation has been that when it comes to saving species, it's a work for NGOs and government, and private sectors are coming into it right now. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, there are two things here, right? One is going around and saving the world and sorting things out differently. But I think every company has its own ecosystem. An ecosystem means it's got its own products that it produces in a certain way. And if you make sure that whatever you do, your processes as a company, as a person, do not harm the environment, do not harm the planet, and do not deplete resources that you know are not renewable. So that's important for us all. And again, the sun comes up every single morning. The question is, do we really harness it in such a way that we can be much more sustainable? That's one question. The second thing is, you've got the wind, you've got a lot of water, you've got energy coming around. And do we still go back to hydrocarbons or not? And that's a big question mark for everybody to say. But openly, I think it's very clear that water is available. There's enough water available in the oceans. Can we now bring that and harness that and have major desalination works? Can we have solar energy that is now working? And it actually makes a lot of sense in terms of monetary value. It saves you money in order to do that. So it makes you more competitive. And I think the minute you align competitiveness with sustainability, people will start saying, yes, I want to be there because it's the right thing to do, but also it makes monetary sense.
The issue of companies operating on being good to the environment and not seen as only acting based on its community social responsibility guidelines came up.
And one aspect that we are very keen on at Sustainable and Inclusive Business is to have a component of corporate social responsibility within companies, or rather other companies now look at it as corporate social investments. So these are different terms but could mean around a similar thing, where you also try to impact the community around you. We normally talk about the triple P: planet, people, and profits. People, planet, and profits. And in this context, then you find that for a business to be sustainable, they must look at its profitability. And in that context, then they are looking at the economic angle, so that they're able to meet their obligations, short and long term. Now, when you're looking at the environment, of course, you exist in an environment, and in the production of your services or your product. In marketing, in product, then you have both element of a product as a physical good or a service.
I know often we look at communities as beneficiaries, something which we shouldn't. You know, they don't necessarily need to benefit from CSR. They are still the customers. You know, these communities are not out there, and we are saying, you know, we have done this well, and therefore we need to give something back. They are not beneficiaries. They are actually the stewards of the natural environment. And I think if you look at areas where we have these communities, sometimes who we say local communities, that is where we have most of our natural capital. And when I say natural capital, I mean they are holding our water resources, they are holding our soils, they are holding our wildlife. You know, in Nairobi now, we don't have people living with lions, you know, harmoniously. They are in the park. In the Mara, they are living in their land. So they are not beneficiaries, but they are the stewards of the natural environment. And I think as we, you know, continue to say, you know, what would businesses do, we are also looking at that as it's not just you know, CSR, but it is investing in these communities, investing in these people who are stewards of the natural resources. And I think when we, you know, those are the kind of discussions that we are having also with the private sector, that as we go, we need to go beyond, you know, corporate social responsibility and talk about these communities who are stewards. How do we enable them to continue the stewardship? Yeah, and how do they feel that it makes business sense? And that's where the private sector comes, because what we have seen even as conservationists is if it does not make business sense, who is interested? But if I know if I take care of my soil and water, then I have better returns. I'll actually take care of that soil and water, not because of communities downstream or even sometimes future generations. I'll do it because it makes business sense now. If I know the corporates are going to source materials from me because I have grown them sustainably. Say, for instance, if you were the private sector wants furniture, wants timber, and they decide, okay, it's a little bit more expensive, but it has been planted and it has been grown sustainably, and they intend to buy from that customer or that community, then the community member is going to continue to grow sustainably because there is a market. So, you know, that kind of a balance, I think, is what we are looking at also going forward.
The main call I garnered from the dialogue today is the importance of sustainability.
When you actually show certain things that are going to evolve and certain things that are going to be not available anymore and they're really beautiful, we always cry. We always start saying, yeah, that's a pity. But that's the way the world is. The world is evolving. We are going to evolve and it keeps on. So I think it's this whole planet is such a beautiful place we don't have the eyes to see it in that manner. All we see is my job, my money, my this, my position, my status. And I think this is something that we got to see, observe, look at the greenery, look at the trees. We've got so much more going for us. We've got amazing stuff here. So I don't think there's a problem with that. But we've got a lot of beauty. Look at the Rift Valley, look at, the lakes, look at the seaside. We've got amazing beauty. Look at Turkana, for example, a desert, and it's got a lot of water underneath it. There's a lot we could do with being sustainable. So there's a lot more. We can all do it in a nice way. And I think the future, as I speak right now, I think the future is going to be far more exciting, because now with solar, with electric vehicles coming through, you'll have less of hydrocarbons. So we're entering into an era where this is something that is going to be inevitable. It's not going to be that we're going to be forced to do it. I think there will be need to have legislation around throwing away waste into the environment. But apart from that, I think overall, we just all got to say, let's all come together as a family, make this happen.
We are hoping that Kenya becomes a leader in Africa in terms of the business community in Kenya saying we want to be part of that change. Because by 2030, should things continue the way they are continuing, now we talk about extremely expensive costs for electricity. I'm sure Amadi knows this better than I do. Businesses find electricity very expensive. Now, when businesses start finding water very expensive, we have gone from, water from the government, what is piped from rivers and the Maraguas and Sasumua Dam. And now people are doing a borehole in each, anytime you do an investment, you do a borehole. A few years ago, we would do boreholes at 200 meters, 250 meters down. Now in Nairobi, if you don't do beyond 500 meters, you can't get water. So when it becomes very, difficult to do business because water is expensive and you can't substitute water with oil or substitute water with sand because we have that in plenty, then what is going to happen to these businesses? They would either have to shift south, like we have seen because of electricity, they move to other countries or something else. So it makes sense to talk about that P for the planet, even maybe much more than the profit, because they may not have profit now as they invest, but in the coming years, the planet will enable them, to thrive. Yeah.
Sometimes we forget and say, okay, we need to preach to or tell the other people. The word preach is coming to my mind because my name is Ebenezer. So sometimes someone call me a church guy.
Yeah.
So in that context, then sometimes we point a finger and we forget that the other finger is pointing at us. So always have to have a conversation with ourselves. And within the private sector, COVID has made us sit down and reflect on our business model, on our business values, and what is most relevant for us as people, first of all, and also as corporates. And we have observed that nature, again, is one of the things that we need to take care of, because it means if you keep cutting your trees, then it will have a ripple effect in the future. Though we may not experience it now, in some few years we'll start experiencing it because the weather patterns will start changing, and of course the resources will start depleting. If you are using charcoal and there's no more trees, that means that the prices will go up because the commodity is no longer available. Basics of demand and supply. So you also have to look at alternative ways for us to find sustainable fuel for us. We're looking at using solar, for example. We're looking at using waste as input for production. For example, you're seeing nowadays there's also people are quite receptive to use of briquettes and pellets made from sludge. Which in other cases it will have been very difficult to convince you to use briquettes made from sludge. So people are opening up to different conversations.
80% of our economic activities are based on natural capital. Our forests, our water resources, our minerals, whatever it is, 80%. So if this 80% is, if we don't replenish it, if we destroy it, then what business does the private sector have in this country? So if they are and we are also part of the private sector, individually or even organizationally, if the natural capital base where we draw our economic goods, as Ebenezer is saying, is depleted, then we cannot have businesses on a dead planet. And we cannot have jobs on a dead planet. So I think that is where, as conservation organizations, we are saying, private sector always, they have solutions. And I think you've seen that. If there is a need, the private sector will come up with a solution. If there is a market, the private sector will come up with a solution. So since there is this big and urgent need to just bend that curve on biodiversity, natural capital loss, what solutions does the private sector have? And that's where this engagement is coming in.
The sustainability movement is a movement, right? Which means we all need to play a role. We all need to come together. Every single person in business, whichever business, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's goods or it's services, whichever industry you're in, needs to come together and say, I need to worry about my environment. I need to worry about my climate. I need to worry about how I don't harm the environment. My environmental footprint is something that I've got to be careful about. And therefore, if we all take responsibility, right? Ni wajibu wetu. If we just do that and say, ni wajibu wetu, let's do something about it. Sio haki yetu. I think it's about wajibu wetu. We take it in our hands and say, our environment, our responsibility. And if each one of us does that, we can actually win this war.
Private sectors need to play its part on eradication of industrial pollution by moving towards sustainable industrial production.